good morning, everyone. We are here today with Sandrine Loncke. For those of you who don't know her or her film, What If Babel Was Just a Myth, she's a French ethnomusicologist and filmmaker. She's also an associate professor at the Department of Music at the University of Paris 8 Saint-Denis, and is a member of the Center for Research in Ethnomusicology. Is that right?
Yeah, it's right. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for being here today with us, Sandrine. It's a great pleasure to talk to you about yourself as a filmmaker and your film, which was a finalist in our last edition of LabMeCrazy Science Film Festival. And I must say it's a film that I really enjoyed. So congratulations for that. It was a great film.
Thank you very much, Miren. Thank you. And also thank you to the LabMeCrazy Science Film Festival for interviewing me. Sorry, yes. And I must, before I start, I'd say that I don't have much opportunity to practice spoken English these days. So thank you for being patient with me. And if I sometimes, I'm sometimes looking for my words. Sorry.
Yeah, don't worry. I'm sure everything you say will be very interesting for our viewers and other people who are trying to learn how to make films. So that's all right.
Thanks.
So for someone who hasn't watched your film, What If Babel Was Just a Myth, how would you explain what it is about, or what did you do for that film?
Yeah, okay, in a nutshell, it's not so easy. I'd say that, okay, it is an immersion film that takes place in a small village in southern Chad. And as an ethnomusicologist, I was part of a humanities research program for 3 years, which aimed to document the language and culture of a small society of farmers, fishermen, that now consists of only 700 people. Wow. Spread over 2 villages. Just before my departure in Chad, while I was discussing this project with young people who were yet very committed to the issues of biodiversity loss in the world, I was asked the same question several times. Learning a language spoken by 700 people, very well. But what is the point? Yeah. The film starts with from this question: what is the value of these small languages and small cultures that are threatened all around the world? To what extent language is a place where we encode our cultural knowledge, and why in the West do we have such a utilitarian relationship with language learning, when in these small isolated villages of Central Africa it is common even among children to speak about between 5 and 7 languages.
Wow, that's so good.
Yeah, so with this question in mind, I began to follow Florian Lyonnais, my young linguist friend, as he accompanied the people of the village in their daily activities. Through his mediation, we gradually discovered the inhabitants of this small rural African society, which I believe challenges many of our preconceptions.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was watching the film and I was shocked with their traditions and their language, and it was really good. You made a great work, like grasping all of the culture. It was really good. Yeah.
Thanks.
And so you said that the film focuses on, following this Florian Lyonnais, and your work was to document the language, but you also worked with like filming their songs, their traditions, etc. And it's like, okay, so the film is mainly about linguistics, but your specialty is more ethnomusicology. So how would you say these two fields are related, or how do they like relate to each other? How are they linked?
Yeah. This is not a simple question to answer. Okay. Music, especially in Africa, is often associated with singing. or with sometimes very elaborate forms of oral literature, epics, historic narratives, poems, sacred songs, mythology, tales, etc. All these literary forms are often set to music.
Okay.
And also each social group also conveys its knowledge through song repertoires. Fishermen, farmers, herders, hunters, craftsmen. Each generation also, and often each gender, male or female, expresses its concerns and its word representations in music. Therefore, when a musical practice disappears, it is often all sections of knowledge that are no longer transmitted. And conversely, when language disappears, it is also poetic forms and oral literature, and with them the whole worldview that they expressed that risk being silenced. In this sense, music and language studies are totally linked. They are so linked that personally I cannot imagine documenting a music and what musical practices tell us about a society without trying to learn the language of that society. Okay, that's it, the first point. But in the other way, musical diversity and linguistic diversity do not go hand in hand. Music seems to me to circulate much more easily than languages, with all the risks of homogenization that this implies. We easily borrow the music of our neighbors, and with the globalization, we even draw on musical styles from faraway cultures. On the contrary, languages seem to be much stronger identity markers. But the counterpart with that is that when a language disappears, it is much more difficult to revitalize it than from music. And I suppose that it is because language is the medium of our communication and our daily relationships. So why should we learn a language that it is no longer spoken by everyone, by anyone, sorry. Whereas music is not a means of communication, it is the language of emotions and affects. And it is therefore more likely to be understood by everyone. And this is why I believe it is more motivating and easier to revive a musical style. As we have seen, for example, in the 1970s in France, with the case of Corsican and Breton music. These musics are still alive today. They continue to be played and to change. While there are very few native speakers of Corsican or Breton languages among young people today, as far as I know. Voilà. And this is also what we learn from this small Chadian village where the film was shot. At first, yes, I must say, sorry, that at first I intended to make a film about music. But when I got there, I realized that all the music repertoires related to the traditional belief systems were disappearing under the impact of Islamization process. Only festive music remained, those which are less charged with cultural meaning. And on the other hand, the languages, sometimes spoken by no more than 100 speakers, remained not only very alive in this place, in this area, but each one learned the language of the other.
Yeah.
And this situation totally fascinated me, because I suddenly realized that that this must have been the situation of all humanity before the emergence of centralized forms of power, like kingdoms, empires, nation states.
Yeah, that's
And
the vision
all.
we have in Europe, right? Like,
Yes, exactly. But in the whole world, and all these um, forms of power advocate for cultural and linguistic unification. And finally, the situation of Chad is very rare nowadays. And we've forgotten that we are inherently multilingual.
yeah.
And that is what this small Chadian village is reminding us, and is why it was so fascinating for me. And yes, I realized that as long as a dominant power does not impose linguistic unification on us, it is more natural for human beings to keep their own language and learn that of their neighbors in order to communicate with them than to adopt a common vehicular language.
So we could say that your film did like two things in one, right? On the one hand, it documented and it kind of saved, right, a language and a music system, which like you preserved a tradition, right? But at the same time, you also managed to find like an example of how the natural state of language was, right? Because nowadays in Europe, you cannot find that linguistic diversity where everybody speaks 5 to 7 languages. That's impossible here in Western societies. So it's like a double thing, right? In the one hand, you preserved one single language and one system of value, but at the same time, you could view like a universal state of how languages should be, right?
Yes, it was very difficult with this film. There are two subjects in one film.
Yeah.
Yeah, so to speak. Yeah, the multilingualism, which is very special in this area because it was a region where, which was on the margin of the Baguirmi Empire. So I suppose it's why they kept until now all these languages and this multilingualism, this habit to learn the language of their native. And on the other hand, yes, it is a threatened language because I don't want to tell what is in the film, but of course we can imagine that young people want to leave the village and have a better life. And the globalization has, of course, a huge impact.
Yeah, of course. So from your answer, I can already have an idea, but for your work, you have focused on especially West African countries. Because you have, from what I've read, you have also worked in Burkina Faso and Nigeria as well, right?
Niger,
Niger,
yeah.
okay, yeah, Niger, okay.
Yeah.
So why did you choose? Yeah, it's like they have the same name. Okay.
No, it's Nigeria. Is
So why did you choose to focus on this area of the world? Why is it different from others?
Oh, yeah, thank you for this question. I've often been asked this question. I suppose that Africa attracted me because of the injustice of the situation. It is a sacrificed continent, which has, as we know, the richest subsoil on the planet, but the lowest standards of living on its surface. And these two facts being, of course, completely correlated. And within this continent, I also chose to work more particularly with small marginalized societies, either because they are nomadic, like Fulani people, or because they are a minority, like in this example of Chad. And in other words, societies that have never been given a voice in the concert of nations.
Mm-hmm.
That was my first impulse, I think. But as I became more and more familiar with these societies, I began to deeply appreciate them. And I think it is because the people I met in these small societies still cultivate a conception of the world, where human being is not all powerful, but a part of the natural world as any other species. At the anthropologist Bruno Latour would say they are still aware of the fact that our planet Gaia is alive and inseparable from us, that the Earth is an ecosystem where all living things of which we are part are connected and interdependent. And this respect for life, and also the awareness of its fragility, and the fact that we are mortal beings, which they never forget in Africa. All that deeply moves me, and I feel that it helps me to stay focused on the essential. Okay. So it was for me countries with whom I've learned a lot about life and my own life. And but also there is one thing that I want also to say, which is perhaps rarely said. It is that although these small indigenous societies represent only 5% of the world's population, alone they speak 5,000 of the world's 6,500 languages. That is to say more than 70%.
Yeah.
And they are also the guardians of 80% of the world's biodiversity. And of course it is correlated.
Yeah, of course.
Therefore, I really believe it is urgent to listen to what they have to tell us.
Absolutely. Because in the film, you also say that there is this big risk of losing language in the future century. So like we should really document it. I agree with you, absolutely. So the societies you described, you mentioned marginalized societies and you like to give voice to them, which I think is great. And you also mentioned nomadic societies and like very small cultures that I'm sure are very different from what we are used to, right? Well, you live in France, I live in Spain, but you know, we live in a Western society. I guess you must have had like big culture shocks in your career. Could you tell us like some story or something, you know, something funny that you can think of?
Funny.
Well, or interesting or shocking or whatever.
Yes, there are so many culture shocks. Some funny, some very wonderful. Some are also harder to live with. Okay, one of the first shocks I remember. I was about 20-year-old, and it was my first return to France, to Paris, after the first long stay in a small Fulani village in the north of Burkina Faso. And I was coming back from a place where I hadn't produced any waste for 7 months.
Wow.
Even my scrap paper was recycled by the villagers, especially the children who used it to roll their cigarettes.
Okay.
So when I went shopping in the supermarket down my street in Paris, I turned around, I couldn't buy anything. And it was not because of the amount of food that I could see there. I think it was the tons of unnecessary packaging.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was crazy. It was just impossible to buy anything for me. And it's a memory from about 1994, But as I tell you about it, I realized that it is since that day that I can't stay in supermarkets anymore.
Well, that's not a bad thing either.
I don't know if it's a funny memory. But above all, I think I would like to say it is a way of life, and when you go on the field for so many years, you lose sometimes relatives while you are in the field, um, and over so many years of cultural exchange with other societies, you evolve and transform yourself through contact with those people who sometimes become like your second family.
Yeah.
And to the point where you become a bit of a hybrid. Yeah, hybrid. So the real shock for me now is that the economic and political conditions no longer allow me to travel freely to visit my friends there on both sides of the Mediterranean Sea, because for me it's now dangerous, but for them it is just forbidden to come.
Yeah.
And that's a big shock.
Absolutely.
It's just so many years. Yeah.
Well, from what you say, we can see that like the situation is unfair, but we also, as Europeans, we have a lot to learn from them, right? Because what you mentioned about the packages is just an example. Like we can learn a lot, and I think your film also shows that, right? That we can learn a lot from that small village in Chad. That's good.
I hope so.
Yeah. So another thing that I was thinking of is that, as you know, our festival is a scientific film festival, and people who have watched the interview so far will have realized that your work is mainly humanitarian, right? Like you focus on humanities, right? You focus on linguistics, you focus on ethnology, music, culture, societies. Yeah, but you do so from a very strictly scientific point of view, yeah, right? You go there, you observe the situation, you collect your data somehow, and your film has this very scientific approach. So I was like, that was interesting for me, because at least here in Spain, we have an approach where humanities go in one side and then sciences go in another side. And this film just, combines them both greatly, I think. So do you think like humanities can benefit from science, or science can benefit from the humanities? Or yeah, what's your opinion on that?
Okay, for me, humanities are a science like the others. Not an exact science, supposedly, but even exact sciences confess that they are not so exact as they would like to be. So, okay, this is a big question. I think we must accept that there is no complete objectivity possible when man studies himself or studies his fellow men. We cannot totally abstract ourselves from the psychological, cultural, and historical contexts in which we evolve, so that human sciences cannot be completely independent of our preconceptions.
We're part of what we're studying, right?
Exactly, yeah. Each generation develops a different view of human societies, but if we take a step back, it seems that this view has constantly evolved towards greater tolerance and understanding. And in this way, I think, yes, science really is really nurturing humanities. For example, we just can remember that in the 16th century, Christian religious circles were still debating whether the Indians of the New World really had a soul. And a little later, they asked the question again about the Africans they were enslaving. We forget that no more than a century ago, evolutionary theories which still dominated the field of human sciences, asserted that all human societies pursue the same goal. And so go through the same, we're supposed to go through the same 3 stages of evolution, savagery, barbarism, and finally the state of civilization, which our modern Western societies were, of course, the only ones to have fully reached. Okay.
Hypocrisy.
Nowadays, the understanding we have of a society seems to me much more relativistic and egalitarian. I'm rather optimistic.
Yes, you are.
Perhaps humanity has never been so close to accepting the idea of a universal human nature or a universal human spirit. And I'm sure that it allows us to better accept our cultural differences. I hope so. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did. And I think it's a very good message, very optimistic. I hope like you can spread your word and more people can get to understand it. Okay, so now for the filmmakers who will send their films to the festival this year, because we are now accepting films for next year's festival. Since your film has been awarded many prizes and has been selected for many festivals, which again, congratulations. What would you say are the key factors or like the must-dos to have a good scientific film that, you know, communicates effectively? Did I explain myself?
Could you tell?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So your film is able to communicate a complex science subject, scientific perspective, and turns it into a very attractive, interesting film. Like, how would you say that a storytelling should be?
Okay. For scientific communication, you mean? Okay, for me, the role of a scientific film is not so much to deliver results or to give figures. It's not also to bring definitive answers on a subject. Since we know that science never stops evolving. I think that scientific films should, above all, allow the viewer to ask himself the right questions and to be empowered with the relevant tools to reflect by himself. And this implies, according to me, this implies showing the research process itself. How do we construct the results? How do we elaborate the results? In showing how we work is the best way to allow the viewer to project himself, to identify, to marvel, or to revolt also, and perhaps finally to get involved. This means also that the researchers with film should be able to convey their own questions, their own doubts, their emotions, and of course their passion. Well, I would say in my case, when our subjects of study are humans, I want also to say that it seems essential to me to give them a voice, of course, and to show how the research is constructed with them. What is their involvement in the project? What are their relations with the researcher, the research team?
So like you would say that the objective of a scientific film is not so much to show the results of a research project, but all the project, right?
Yes, the process,
Okay.
Yeah,
That's very interesting.
because it's a way to empower people in order they can identify the process and in a way be at the place of the researcher. Yeah, follow its research.
So like, you know, in a way, like everyone who's watching What If Babel Was Just is becoming a researcher as well, right? It's good. It's like it's traveling to Chada again to make the discoveries with you.
Yeah, sorry.
So I'm saying that
in a way,
I had the feeling when I was watching your film that
yeah,
I was in a way traveling to Chad again and doing the research with you. Like I was watching the whole process.
Yeah, this is what I mean. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. Good if you felt that. Thanks.
Yeah. So, are you working on any new project now? Are you like planning a new stay in another African country, or are you thinking of another film? Or
okay. Planning to go to African countries for the moment is a bit difficult.
A bit difficult, yeah.
In times of pandemic, COVID.
Hopefully, it will be over soon.
I had a project, but it is yes, in standby for the moment. I currently have 3 projects in progress, but with the events, I absolutely don't know yet what will come out of them, and it's a bit difficult for me to talk about them now. But I'd say that even if we are prevented to travel today, it will not prevent me from continuing to apply my ethnographic glance on the world. Yeah, and even I would say that it's more and more urgent to do so. So yes, I have projects, but slowly.
Well, then hopefully we will see something in the future, not in the near future.
Yes, I hope. Yeah.
Well, great.
Sure.
So to finish, I just wanted to ask you, do you know how to say thank you in Laal, in the language you documented?
Yeah. Okay. When you ask me that, I can hear women every morning saying, Tesse, Tesse, Sandrine, Tesse, Tesse, Sandrine. Okay. Tesse is the way you thank someone for little things of everyday life. Okay. In African languages, there are always 2 ways to thank people, and for important service. You don't say, you wouldn't say tesse tesse, you will say rag makana barka. Rag makana barka means God bless you. It's the way you thank people for important things, and Rag is God in Lal, but it's not the God of Islam. It's an animistic God.
Okay. Well, Rag Makanabana, did I say that correctly?
Rag Makana Barka. Barka is, we know this word which comes from Arabic languages, baraka. The chance.
Okay.
Yes.
Rag Makana Barka, Sandrine.
Barka, yeah.
Well, thank you. Merci beaucoup. It was a pleasure to talk to you. I've learned a lot. You have said many, many interesting things. So I hope that people watching the interview will also enjoy it. And hopefully we will see you soon in the festival with another film or else just visiting. And well, thank you very much.
Many thanks to you, Miren. And thanks you really again to the whole team of the LabMeCrazy Science Film Festival in Pamplona, and also thanks for maintaining the 2021 edition of the festival despite all the current difficulties that we know. Yeah. So thank you.
It was great to give voice to fantastic films as yours and others. So it was worth it, definitely.
Thanks.
Well, thank you very much then.
Thank you, Miren. Bye-bye.